While I was recovering in the hospital, my husband called to say, "I'm having a great time on vacation. Don't expect me to come home early." I replied, "I won't." When he returned, he found everything gone and a divorce attorney waiting. The sterile white walls of the hospital room felt suffocating, the rhythmic beeping of the monitors a constant reminder of my fragile state. The pain medication dulled the ache in my body, but it couldn't numb the deeper wound, the loneliness. I had hoped for a message, even a brief call from him to ask how I was doing. But there was nothing. Silence stretched across the hours, filling the gaps where his love used to be. Then my phone buzzed. My heart leaped, a foolish reflex of hope. I grabbed it, ignoring the four tugging at my wrist. His name flashed on the screen. Finally. Maybe he had realized how much I needed him. Maybe he would apologize for not being here. I pressed the answer button, my breath shallow. "I'm having a great time on vacation. Don't expect me to come home early." We did it. We're hitting 10,000 subscribers, and I couldn't be more grateful for this incredible community. Your support, your engagement, and your love for these stories of strength and transformation mean the world. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Join us for more powerful narratives of resilience and taking back control. Let's keep growing together. His voice was relaxed, almost lazy, as if he were lounging on a beach somewhere, the sound of waves in the background. No concern. No warmth. Just a casual update about how much fun he was having while I lay in a hospital bed, alone. I swallowed hard, the sting of betrayal lodging itself deep in my chest. My fingers tightened around the phone, but my voice remained eerily calm. "I won't." He chuckled. "That's the spirit. Enjoy your rest. I'll see you when I see you." The call ended. I stared at the screen, my mind blank. The room suddenly felt colder. The pain I had ignored for months, the dismissiveness, the late nights, the way he had slowly distanced himself. It all came crashing down. This wasn't just selfishness. It was deliberate. He didn't care. Not about my pain, my recovery, my existence. I had spent years making excuses for him, convincing myself that he was just busy, that his emotional absence was temporary, that the love I had once felt so deeply for him would return if I was patient enough. But in that moment, as the silence filled the room once more, I knew. He was gone. Not physically, not yet. But the man I had married, the one I had built a life with, had long since checked out. And now it was my turn. I exhaled slowly, my grip loosening on the phone. There was no point in tears. No room for sadness. Not anymore. Something shifted inside me. A quiet realization, a steel-cold certainty. If he could be so indifferent, so utterly detached from our life, then I owed him nothing. The pain in my body was temporary, but the pain he had inflicted on my heart? That had to be answered. I had always been the one waiting, the one hoping. But not anymore. This time I wouldn't be the one left behind. The silence after that call was deafening. I had thought the pain of his absence was something I could endure, but in that moment I realized the truth was far worse. It was the deliberate neglect, the coldness, the way he had dismissed me so easily. As if I were nothing more than an afterthought in his carefully curated life. He had moved on long before that phone call. I had just been too blind to see it. Lying there in that sterile hospital room, I felt as though I was watching my own life from a distance. A spectator to a marriage that had been unraveling for years. Every memory that I had once clung to as proof of our love now played back in my mind with a cruel, distorted clarity. The late nights he never explained. The forgotten anniversaries. The moments where his phone would buzz and he would turn away, muttering vague excuses. I had spent so long convincing myself that things would get better, that the love we had built was just going through a rough patch. But love doesn't leave you alone in a hospital bed while it vacations without a care in the world. A nurse entered the room, adjusting my four, asking if I needed anything. I shook my head, managing a polite smile, but my mind was elsewhere. I had spent too much time waiting for someone who had already left me behind. I wasn't going to waste another second. I needed answers. As soon as I was discharged, I went home. Or rather, the house that had once felt like home. Now it was just a structure filled with shadows of memories I no longer recognized. I walked through the quiet hallways, my fingers brushing against the furniture we had picked out together. The framed photos that now felt like relics of a life that no longer existed. The walls had witnessed my loneliness long before I had admitted it to myself. I sat down on the couch, phone in hand, my pulse steady with purpose. I searched through our shared accounts, scrolling through months of transactions. Lavish hotel bookings. Dinners at expensive restaurants. High-end boutiques. And none of them had been for me. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I wouldn't cry for him. Not anymore. I moved on to our phone records. Late-night calls. Unfamiliar numbers. The same pattern over and over. It was undeniable. It wasn't just distance or indifference. It was something far more deliberate. For the first time in a long time, I felt something other than heartbreak. It was clarity, sharp and cold. I had been waiting for an explanation, for some sort of moment where he would finally admit the truth. But he never would. He would continue as if nothing had happened, expecting me to be the same woman who forgave, who endured, who accepted his disregard like it was part of marriage. I had no intention of being that woman anymore. But before I did anything, I needed confirmation. Real, undeniable proof. I wasn't going to react out of emotion. I was going to be smart about this. That's when I made the call. The private investigator answered on the second ring, his voice professional but firm. I had never imagined myself needing such a service, but there was no hesitation in my voice as I explained what I needed. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He had probably heard it all before. "Give me a week," he said. I gave him 3 days. The wait was excruciating, but I kept myself occupied. I went about my days as if nothing had changed, answering his sporadic text messages with practiced indifference. He didn't ask about my recovery. He didn't even pretend to care. And yet, that worked in my favor. He had no idea that while he was sipping cocktails by the ocean, I was dismantling the life he had so carelessly taken for granted. When the investigator finally called back, I felt the weight of everything I had been suppressing settle deep in my bones. His voice was calm, methodical as he went through the findings. He had been thorough. There were pictures, receipts, conversations, a different city, a different woman, an entire secret life, one he had built while I had been clinging to the remnants of our marriage. I listened, taking in every detail without reaction. I had suspected it. I had known it. But seeing the truth laid out so plainly was something else entirely. It should have broken me. It didn't. If anything, it solidified what I already knew. He had walked away from me a long time ago. He just hadn't expected me to do the same. That was his mistake. I didn't need revenge fueled by anger. I didn't need confrontation. What I needed was strategy. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about me. About reclaiming my life. About ensuring that when he walked back into this house, expecting to find the woman he had left behind, he would find nothing waiting for him. Nothing except the consequences of his choices. Because this time I wasn't going to be the one left behind. I was going to be the one who walked away first. I sat at the dining table, staring at the neatly arranged folder before me. It felt heavier than it looked, though I knew it was just paper, documents, photographs, undeniable proof. Proof that my husband had built an entirely separate life while I had been clinging to the ruins of our marriage. Proof that the distance between us had never been a misunderstanding, but a carefully crafted escape. I inhaled deeply, then flipped the folder open. The first thing I saw was a picture. A high-resolution shot of him sitting at a candlelit restaurant, across from a woman who was very much not his wife. She was younger, polished in a way that suggested she had never known struggle. Her smile was effortless, the kind of smile that belonged to someone who believed she had won. My fingers traced the edges of the photo, feeling a strange sort of detachment, as if I were looking at someone else's life, someone else's betrayal. Page after page, the truth unfolded. Bank statements detailing extravagant getaways. Messages exchanged between them, full of whispered promises and carefully scheduled meetings. A lease agreement. My husband was paying rent for a luxurious apartment in another city. I had never set foot in that apartment, never even known it existed. But she had. She had likely picked the furniture, chosen the curtains, arranged the picture frames. My husband had built a second home and I wasn't a part of it. The realization settled over me like a heavy weight, but I didn't cry. The time for tears had passed. Instead, a calm, resolute clarity filled me. This wasn't just about romance or betrayal. It was about deception, about the life he had stolen from me while he crafted another elsewhere. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen before I made the call. The private investigator answered immediately, his voice steady, professional. "I've sent everything over," he said. "There's more if you need it." I closed my eyes, exhaling. No, I replied, my voice stronger than I expected. This is enough. And it was. More than enough. I spent the next few hours sitting in silence, absorbing it all. Every carefully hidden transaction, every stolen moment he had spent with her instead of me. A year ago this would have shattered me. 6 months ago it would have made me beg for answers. But today it only fueled the fire burning inside me. I wasn't going to confront him. That would be too easy, too predictable. He expected me to cry, to shout, to demand explanations that he would never provide. No, I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I would do what he never saw coming. I would walk away first. And when I did, I would ensure that he had nothing left to return to. But first, I needed to know more. I pressed my lips together, picking up the folder once again. There was one thing I had overlooked. A name. Hers. The woman who had been living the life I had fought to hold on to. The woman who had looked at a married man and thought he was hers to claim. I tapped her name into my phone, my heart steady as I scrolled through the search results. Social media. Work profiles. An address. She wasn't just some fleeting mistake, she was a part of his life, woven into it so deeply that there was no denying it. For a brief moment I wondered if she knew. Did she think she was the only one? Had he spun the same lies for her that he had once spun for me? Or was she complicit, fully aware of the pain she was helping to inflict? I could have reached out to her. Could have exposed everything, shattered the illusion she had been living in. But that wasn't my fight. My battle wasn't with her. It was with the man who had vowed to stand by me and then abandoned me the moment it became inconvenient. I placed the folder back on the table, my decision solidified. I wouldn't warn him. Wouldn't give him time to prepare, to manipulate the situation to his advantage. No, I would move quietly, strategically. By the time he realized what was happening, it would be too late. He thought he had been playing a game, balancing two lives without consequence. What he didn't realize was that I had just changed the rules. This time I wasn't waiting for the inevitable heartbreak. I was writing my own ending. The weight of the truth had settled in, not as a burden but as fuel. I had wasted years waiting for something that no longer existed. Now I was done waiting. I was done hoping for answers that would never come. It was time to act. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder of evidence spread before me. Every page, every picture, every document was a step toward my freedom. But I wouldn't leave blindly. I wouldn't storm out in anger, demanding explanations that he wasn't worthy of giving. No, I would walk away with precision, ensuring that when he returned, there would be nothing left for him to salvage. My first call was to the attorney. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and reassuring. She listened carefully, asking the right questions, guiding me through the process with a certainty that matched my own. She didn't ask if I was sure. I think she could hear it in my voice. This wasn't a rash decision. This was strategy. We need to move quickly, she advised. Do you have access to all financial accounts? I did. And that was my next step. I pulled up our joint bank accounts, methodically transferring funds into an account in my name only. I left nothing that he could claim, nothing he could use to fight me. I wasn't just walking away. I was ensuring that he had nothing left to stand on. The house was next. The deed was in both our names, but that didn't matter. My attorney had already advised me on how to handle that. Quietly, discreetly, I reached out to a real estate broker. I wasn't selling the house, not yet. But I was removing his name. By the time he returned, the home he had abandoned would no longer belong to him. Each move felt like a quiet victory, a step toward reclaiming the life he had stolen from me. But I wasn't done yet. I thought about the woman, the one he had built a second life with. I had no interest in confronting her, no need to warn her. She had made her choices just as he had. But that didn't mean she should be left out of the equation entirely. I took a deep breath and made another call. This one wasn't to a lawyer or a banker. It was to a journalist I had known in passing, someone who thrived on uncovering the kind of secrets people thought would never come to light. I didn't give her names, not yet. But I laid out the foundation of a story. One about a man who had deceived not just his wife but his colleagues, his clients, his entire professional circle. Send me the details, she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. This sounds like something people will want to read. I smiled, though there was no joy in it. This wasn't about revenge. It was about exposure. There was still more to do. His company, an image-driven, high-profile business, valued reputation above all else. He had always been careful, always meticulous about keeping up appearances. But now I held the strings. I had emails, messages, receipts, proof that he had used company resources for his double life. A quiet email to his firm's HR department, a few carefully selected attachments, and I ensured that his return from vacation wouldn't be the homecoming he had anticipated. By the time the day ended, I had put everything in place. My name was the only one on our assets. My accounts were secured. My attorney had begun the process of finalizing the paperwork. His career was hanging in the balance, waiting for the inevitable fallout. I sat back, exhaling slowly. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not because I had taken anything from him, but because I had taken control back for myself. He had left me alone in that hospital bed, thinking I would wait for him to return. But when he walked through that door, expecting everything to be as he left it, he would find nothing. Not me. Not his home. Not his life. Just the consequences of his own choices. The air in the house felt different. It wasn't just silence. It was the weight of change, a shift in the balance of power that I had never thought possible. Every move I had made was deliberate, precise, calculated. There was no room for hesitation, no space for second-guessing. This was not an impulsive decision fueled by heartbreak. It was a carefully executed plan designed to ensure that when he walked through that door, expecting his life to be waiting for him, he would find nothing but the remnants of his own arrogance. I stood in the middle of the living room, the space that had once been filled with laughter, arguments, and the illusion of a marriage. Now it was a battlefield, and I was the one holding all the power. Every financial tie had been severed. Every shared account closed. The house, once our shared sanctuary, was now legally mine. My attorney had ensured that all paperwork was airtight. There was no loophole, no way for him to fight back. He had walked away from me long ago. Now I was making sure there was no way for him to return. I moved with purpose, packing the last of my things. Not because I had to leave, but because I wanted to. This house held too many memories, too many moments that no longer belonged to me. I had arranged for movers to take the furniture I wanted to a new apartment, a space that would be mine and mine alone. The rest? It was going into storage, stripped away from the home he had abandoned. As I packed, I found myself pausing at the wedding album, tucked away in the back of a cabinet. The cover was thick, the pages heavy with memories of a day that had once felt like the beginning of forever. I flipped through it not with sadness but with an eerie sense of detachment. The smiles, the vows, the promises that had been so easily discarded, it was all just a story now, one that no longer held any weight in my life. I closed the album and placed it in the donation pile. Someone else could find meaning in it because I no longer did. With every box sealed, every belonging accounted for, I moved on to the final phase of my plan. The documents had already been sent to his office. Proof of his financial misdeeds, forwarded to the necessary departments. The journalist I had spoken to was already drafting an exposé, gathering additional sources to corroborate the story. I had no intention of ruining him out of spite. I simply wanted the truth to be known. If that truth happened to dismantle the life he had built on lies, then so be it. By the time I was finished, the house was nothing more than an empty shell. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. Every trace of our life together had been stripped away, leaving only the bones of a home that no longer belonged to him. I walked through each room one last time, ensuring that nothing was left behind. The divorce papers were placed neatly on the kitchen counter, along with a single note, short, simple, and final. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I didn't need to say anything more. As I stepped outside, locking the door behind me for the last time, I felt something unexpected. Not sadness. Not regret. But relief. A lightness that I hadn't felt in years. I had spent so long trying to hold on to something that was already gone. Now I was free. He thought he had played the game well, balancing two lives without consequence. But he had underestimated me. He had assumed I would wait, that I would endure, that I would accept whatever scraps of love he decided to throw my way. He was wrong. Because in the end he wasn't the one who left. I was. The house was silent, stripped of every piece of warmth and familiarity. The walls echoed with emptiness, no longer holding the remnants of our shared life. The air carried a strange hollowness, as if the very foundation of this place had recognized that something irreversible had happened. My work was done. Every item of value had been packed and moved, Every financial tie severed, every legal document set in motion. I had built a life here, but now it was nothing more than a stage for his final act of realization. He would come home expecting comfort, only to find a space as empty as the love he had abandoned. I walked to the kitchen counter, where the divorce papers sat neatly in a crisp white envelope. Beside it was the only note I left for him. No drawn-out explanations, no pleas for understanding, just a few words that would make him realize that his choices had finally caught up with him. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. The pen left an indentation in the paper from the pressure of my hand, proof of the finality of it all. This wasn't an emotional outburst or a desperate attempt to make him feel guilty. This was the end, and I wanted him to feel it in the silence. Stepping back, I glanced around one last time. The house was no longer mine. It wasn't his either. It belonged to the past, to a version of myself that no longer existed. I walked toward the door, my heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. Each step felt like a closing chapter, a footnote in a story that had overstayed its welcome. As I opened the front door, a gust of wind swept through the entrance, carrying with it the crisp scent of the evening. It smelled of change, of freedom. I turned the key in the lock one last time, hearing the soft click as the deadbolt slid into place. The sound echoed in my chest like a heartbeat, steady and sure. With a final deep breath, I let go of the door handle and walked away. Outside, the moving truck was already packed, its doors shut, waiting for my signal. My new apartment awaited me, a place untouched by his betrayal, a space that belonged entirely to me. I slid into my car, gripping the steering wheel as a wave of emotions passed over me. Not sadness, not regret, just a strange sense of peace. I had thought this moment would be painful, that walking away from the life we had built would feel like tearing away a part of myself. But it didn't. It felt like release. As I pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed. His name flashed on the screen. For a second, I considered answering just to hear his voice when he realized something was wrong. But then I remembered the sound of his laughter on that phone call while I lay in a hospital bed, alone. I let the call ring until it stopped. The messages followed soon after. Hey babe, just landed. Can't wait to see you. Then another. Did you forget to pay the Wi-Fi bill? The smart lock isn't working. And finally, one with a hint of panic. Where are you? I smiled to myself but didn't reply. He would find out soon enough. By the time he reached the front door, luggage in hand, he would see that the key no longer worked. He would check his messages again, scrolling through his phone with growing confusion. He would knock, then pound on the door, demanding answers. But there would be no one inside to hear him. Eventually, he would go around to the back, hoping the patio door was unlocked. It wasn't. He would try calling me again, only to find that his number had been blocked. And then finally he would spot the envelope waiting for him on the doorstep. He would tear it open, scanning the words in disbelief. Divorce. Asset division. His name removed from everything. And at the bottom, my simple note, the last words I would ever leave for him. I imagined the moment his face would shift, the realization settling in that he hadn't just lost me, but everything he had once taken for granted. The house. The financial security. The double life he had been living so carelessly. He had built his existence on the assumption that I would always be there, waiting in the background. But he had underestimated me. As I drove toward my new home, I thought about the woman he had been seeing, the one he had so effortlessly woven into his web of lies. Would he run to her now? Would he beg her for comfort, for shelter, for a place to land? Maybe. But it wouldn't matter. I had no interest in what came next for him. He had lost everything and I had gained something he would never understand. Freedom. I imagined the exact moment he stepped onto the porch, still in his vacation mode, the weight of his luggage slowing him down. He would be exhausted from the long flight, expecting nothing more than to toss his bags in the hallway and collapse onto the couch. He had no idea that the house he once knew was no longer his, that everything he thought he controlled had slipped right through his fingers. He would try his key first, jamming it into the lock, assuming the door was just stiff from disuse. But the lock had been changed. He would twist the knob harder, then try again, his confusion shifting to frustration. He would step back, run a hand through his hair, check his phone and see the unanswered messages. I pictured his jaw clenching, his fingers tapping out another text, one he would never get a response to. The realization would hit in waves. First, mild irritation, then an unsettled awareness that something wasn't right. He would walk around the side of the house, checking the patio door, the windows. Locked. No movement inside. No sign of life. And then he would spot it. The envelope resting on the welcome mat like an execution order. A formal, sterile thing with my lawyer's firm stamped in the corner. His name, printed in sharp black ink, as if the universe itself had left him a message he couldn't ignore. He would bend down, hands trembling slightly now, and rip it open. His eyes would skim over the legal jargon at first, but then he would see it. The word that would shake him to his core. Divorce. Legal separation. Asset transfer. His name removed from everything. He would scan the documents again, his mind refusing to process the words. I imagined him storming back to his car, grabbing his phone, dialing my number with growing panic. The line wouldn't even ring. Walked. That realization alone would send him reeling. He would try my friends, my family, reaching for someone, anyone, who could give him an answer. But I had already warned them. No responses. Only silence. Then the second wave would hit. The gut punch of returning to his car, throwing open his banking app and seeing the truth staring back at him. Every joint account dissolved. His personal funds, drained of my contributions. His name wiped clean from everything that had once been his safety net. I wondered how long it would take before he called his office, only to find out that I had sent everything. The proof, the messages, the shady business dealings that had kept him afloat for so long. The company's PR department wouldn't touch him now. His colleagues, the ones he had always bragged to, would be whispering behind closed doors, his reputation crumbling in real time. His heart would start racing then, the panic fully settling in. He would rush back to the house, slam his fist against the door, shout my name into the void. But there would be no answer. Only the emptiness he had created. And when he finally realized that nothing was coming back, not the house, not the money, not the life he had so effortlessly taken for granted, he would sink onto the steps, phone still clutched in his hand, and stare blankly at the world that had moved on without him. For the first time in years he would feel what I had felt. The loneliness. The abandonment. The bitter truth of realizing that someone you once relied on had already left you behind. And I wouldn't be anywhere near that house to witness it. I would be miles away, starting a new chapter, one that didn't include him. The irony was almost poetic. He had spent years building a secret life, weaving lies, assuming I would always be there, waiting in the shadows. He had assumed he was the one in control. But in the end it was me who left first. It was me who walked away without looking back. And that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all. As he sat on the porch, his world unraveling piece by piece, his hands trembled over the divorce papers. His mind raced, searching for an explanation, a loophole, something, anything, that could undo what had already been set in motion. But no amount of sweet words, carefully spun lies, or manipulation could change the cold, undeniable truth. I had left him before he had the chance to leave me. He had underestimated me, believing I would always be there, waiting in the background, accepting the crumbs of his affection while he lived a double life. But now, for the first time, he was the one left behind. And he had no one to blame but himself. I knew him well enough to predict his next move. He wouldn't accept defeat quietly. He had built his entire life around control. Controlling his image, his finances, and most importantly, me. I wasn't naive enough to believe that he would simply sign the papers and walk away. He would fight. He would rage. He would look for a way to turn the tables back in his favor. But there was nothing left for him to manipulate. Every account had been transferred, every legal document had been solidified, and every possible avenue for him to reclaim what he had lost had been sealed shut. So when my lawyer called and informed me that he had scheduled an urgent meeting, I wasn't surprised. I expected it. And I was ready. The office was modern and pristine, the kind of place that reeked of power and finality. The moment I walked through the glass doors, I felt an odd sense of calm settle over me. This wasn't a battlefield. This was a victory lap. The receptionist greeted me with a polite nod, guiding me to a sleek conference room where my attorney was already waiting. She was calm, composed, the epitome of professionalism. Across from her sat my husband. Or rather, the man who used to be my husband. He looked different now. Not just exhausted from his long flight, but drained, almost ghostly. His once confident posture was slightly hunched, his fingers tapping against the table in barely concealed frustration. He had dressed sharply, as if looking the part of a successful man could somehow fix what had already been broken. But I saw through it. The expensive suit, the polished shoes. It was all just armor, a desperate attempt to mask the chaos that had taken over his life. His eyes met mine the second I entered, searching, pleading, but I gave him nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just indifference. "Sit," my lawyer said smoothly, breaking the tense silence. I took my seat, crossing my legs, placing my hands neatly on the table. I could feel his gaze boring into me, waiting for me to crack, to show some sign of hesitation. But I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head as he glanced down at the divorce papers. "This is insane," he muttered. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied evenly. His lips pressed into a thin line. "You're really going through with this?" I tilted my head slightly, studying him. "You seem surprised." He let out a humorless chuckle, leaning back in his chair. "I thought we were better than this." The audacity almost made me laugh. Better than what? Better than the months of deception? Better than the private life he had built behind my back? He spoke as if we had been equals in this, as if his actions had been minor mistakes rather than calculated betrayals. My lawyer cleared her throat. "Mr. Reynolds, this is a legally binding agreement. You were served properly. We are not here to renegotiate." His jaw tensed. "This is ridiculous. You can't just take everything and walk away." I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but firm. "You already did." The words hit him harder than I expected. His breath hitched for a fraction of a second, his fingers tightening into fists before he quickly masked his reaction. But I saw it. For the first time he understood. He scoffed, shaking his head again. "So that's it? After everything we've been through?" I didn't flinch. "Yes." A long silence stretched between us. I could almost hear the wheels turning in his mind, scrambling for a way to regain control, to shift the power back in his favor. But it was useless. He turned to my lawyer, his tone sharp. "I refuse to sign this." My lawyer didn't blink. "That's your choice. But if you refuse, we will proceed with litigation which will not work in your favor. Your financial records, your personal dealings, and your professional misconduct are all well documented." She slid a separate folder toward him, one he hadn't seen yet. "If this goes to court, you stand to lose more than just your assets." His expression darkened as he flipped open the folder, scanning the contents. I watched as the color drained from his face. He had known I had discovered his betrayal, but he hadn't anticipated the depth of my knowledge. The bank transfers, the hidden accounts, the misuse of company funds. Every skeleton he had buried was now laid out before him. His fingers trembled as he shut the folder. He knew he had no choice. His eyes flickered toward me one last time, and for a brief moment I saw something real: regret. But it was too late. Regret wouldn't change anything. Regret wouldn't undo the nights I had spent alone, wondering why I wasn't enough. Regret wouldn't erase the pain he had so effortlessly inflicted. He reached for the pen, his movements stiff, mechanical. With a deep inhale, he signed his name on the line that ended our marriage. It was done. My lawyer gathered the papers, sliding them neatly into her case. "We'll be in touch with the finalized documents." I stood, smoothing the fabric of my dress. He remained seated, staring blankly at the papers, the weight of his loss finally sinking in. As I walked toward the door, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Was I really that easy to leave?" I paused but didn't turn around. Instead, I exhaled slowly before answering. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You were that easy to replace." And with that, I stepped out of the room, out of his life, and into a future where I was finally free. The sound of my heels echoed through the marble-floored lobby as I walked out of the law office, the final papers now in my lawyer's possession. The air felt different, lighter, cleaner, untainted by the weight of the past I had finally let go of. I took a deep breath, letting the crispness of the day seep into my bones, filling the spaces where pain and uncertainty had once resided. The battle was over. And I had won. I stepped onto the sidewalk, the hum of the city wrapping around me. People moved past, cars honked in the distance, and life continued as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for me, everything had changed. The chains that had bound me for years had been broken, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I was untethered. I felt my phone buzz inside my purse. A message. I already knew who it was before I even checked. Curiosity made me glance at the screen. It was from him. A single line, "You really walked away just like that?" I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. Even now, after everything, he still didn't understand. He still believed I was the same woman who would second-guess herself, who would hold on to the memories longer than she should. He didn't realize that I had already walked away long before today. I slipped the phone back into my bag without responding. He wasn't worth my words. As I hailed a cab, my mind drifted to the life ahead of me. I had an apartment waiting, a new chapter ready to unfold, and endless possibilities stretching before me. I had spent so many years compromising, adjusting, making myself smaller just to fit into a life that had never truly belonged to me. But now I was free to take up space. To breathe. To exist on my own terms. The cab driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror as I settled into the seat. "Where to?" I smiled, realizing that for the first time in years I didn't have to check with anyone, didn't have to wait for approval. I could go anywhere, be anyone. "Home," I said, and for the first time I truly meant it. The ride was quiet, the city blurring past as I let my thoughts drift. I had spent months planning this moment, but nothing could have prepared me for the peace that settled inside me now. I had expected relief, maybe even satisfaction, but this was something deeper. It was as if I had reclaimed a part of myself I hadn't even realized was missing. By the time the cab pulled up to my building, the weight of the past had fully lifted. I stepped out, tipping the driver before making my way inside. The doorman greeted me with a warm smile, holding the door open as I entered the sleek, modern lobby. This place, this new beginning, was mine alone. The elevator ride up felt like ascending into a different version of myself. The woman who had entered that law office hours ago was not the same woman stepping onto this floor now. I walked to my apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. It was quiet, untouched, waiting for me. No remnants of a past life, no ghosts of a love that had faded long ago. Just open space and endless possibilities. I dropped my bag onto the kitchen counter, slipping off my heels as I moved toward the large window overlooking the city. The skyline stretched out before me, glowing under the evening light. I had once thought freedom would feel lonely, that walking away from everything I had known would leave an emptiness behind. But standing there, gazing at the city, I realized that the only thing I had lost was the version of myself that had allowed someone else to control her story. I poured myself a glass of water, taking a slow sip as I let the moment settle. No sadness. No regret. Only quiet triumph. My phone buzzed again. Another message. I didn't even check this time. Whatever he had to say no longer mattered. Tomorrow I would wake up without the weight of his choices on my shoulders. Tomorrow I would move forward not as someone's wife, not as someone waiting in the shadows, but as myself. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. The night air carried a crisp stillness as I stood by the window of my new apartment, the city lights twinkling like scattered stars below. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed, but inside me, everything was different. I had walked away from a life that had once defined me, and now I was stepping into one that belonged solely to me. There was no more waiting, no more second-guessing, no more wondering if I was enough. I was free. I had expected to feel a void, some lingering sadness for what I had lost. But as I let the quiet settle around me, I realized there was no void at all. Instead, there was space. Space to breathe, to grow, to rediscover the parts of myself that had been buried beneath years of compromise and betrayal. It was in that silence that I finally understood what true victory looked like. It wasn't about making him suffer. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. The real victory was in knowing that I had reclaimed my life. I curled up on the couch, pulling a soft blanket around my shoulders. The scent of fresh linen filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of the chamomile tea I had just brewed. It was a simple comfort, one that I had never allowed myself to enjoy before. For so long, my life had revolved around making him happy, ensuring that his needs were met while mine were pushed to the side. Now there was no one to answer to but myself. My phone sat on the coffee table, silent now. He had stopped messaging hours ago, the realization likely settling in that I wasn't going to respond. It was a strange thought, knowing that he was out there somewhere, alone, grappling with the consequences of his choices. Maybe he was still sitting in that conference room, staring at the divorce papers as if he could somehow will them away. Maybe he was calling his lawyer, trying to find a way to undo what had already been set in stone. Or maybe, just maybe, he was realizing that he had lost something he could never get back. I took a slow sip of my tea, savoring the warmth that spread through me. The bitterness of the past no longer lingered on my tongue. There was no anger left, no resentment. He had once held power over me, but that power had dissolved the moment I chose myself. The days that followed were filled with small victories. Waking up in a bed that was entirely mine. Cooking meals for myself without considering what someone else would want. Filling my space with things that brought me joy. I spent my mornings walking through the city, rediscovering places I had once loved but had stopped visiting because he never had the time. I reconnected with old friends, laughed in ways I hadn't in years, and embraced the beauty of a life that was no longer dictated by someone else's needs. One afternoon, as I sat at a cafe, sipping an espresso and flipping through a book, I felt a presence nearby. I looked up and saw a familiar face, one of his colleagues. He hesitated for a moment before approaching my table, his expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "I heard about everything," he said, pulling out a chair without asking. "Didn't expect to run into you here." I set my book down, offering a polite smile. "Life moves on." He exhaled, shaking his head. "You know, he's not handling it well." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. "He's been a mess," he admitted. "Losing the house, the money, the reputation, he didn't see it coming. Thought he had everything under control." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "They forced him to step down from his position. The board didn't want the bad publicity." I felt a flicker of something. Not satisfaction, not pity, just a quiet acknowledgement that the universe had a way of balancing things out. He had spent years building an illusion, crafting a life where he was untouchable. But the truth had a way of unraveling even the most carefully constructed lies. His colleague studied me for a moment, then chuckled. "You don't look like someone who just went through a messy divorce." I smiled, taking another sip of my coffee. "That's because I didn't lose anything worth keeping." He nodded, a look of admiration crossing his face. "Good for you." As he left, I sat back in my chair, letting the warmth of the afternoon sun wash over me. I didn't need validation from anyone, but hearing that he was struggling with the consequences of his actions was a reminder that I had done the right thing. Walking away hadn't just been about leaving him behind. It had been about reclaiming my own life. Weeks passed and the messages dwindled. I knew he would reach out one last time, not because he wanted me back, but because he couldn't stand the idea of losing control completely. And sure enough, one evening as I stood by my window watching the city lights flicker against the night sky, my phone buzzed with a final message. "I never thought you'd actually leave me." I stared at the screen for a long moment, considering whether to respond. There was nothing left to say. No anger, no sadness, no need for closure. I had already closed that chapter the moment I walked out of that house. Without hesitation, I deleted the message and blocked his number. A cool breeze drifted in through the open window, carrying the scent of rain and fresh possibilities. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, letting the night wrap around me like a comforting embrace. There was no more looking back. No more dwelling on what had been lost. I was finally free. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all.